So I'm going to go ahead and start off with a question to the panelists. I want to hear from all of you. When were you first exposed to entrepreneurship? And was it then when you were first exposed to it, or was it at a different point in your life that you were inspired to pursue it? Who wants to start?
I can jump in. So I was first introduced to entrepreneurship through the Babysitters Club when I was in the 4th grade, and I started because they had like a little babysitting thing, and it was a bunch of friends, and they would go babysit in these books. And so I decided to start something similar, but it was like a dog walking business. And I actually only remember that a couple of weeks ago. I had totally forgotten about this because I had never thought that I would be an entrepreneur. I always thought business was really boring. I was really into math and science. So like that's where I wanted to go. But when I became, very disillusioned in my field, just because of the injustices there and everything, I wanted to still work within academic spaces. And I knew that I could provide a lot of insight as to what a department or a science organization needs, right, to have an inclusive culture. I kind of looked to my partner, who was, early in our marriage. He was taking a class at Georgia Tech called Startup Semester. So it's a little bit similar to what y'all have going on. But he was going through this class, and like every week he was learning something new, and he was like, showing me about it. And I was like, okay, that's you over there. But then later on, when it was time for me to leave and wrap up my dissertation and everything, I was applying for jobs, and it took me, I think I was applying for like 9 months. And I got, I went on interviews and I had a few offers, but nothing was quite what I wanted it to be. So I wanted to work at the intersection of STEM and, diversity and inclusion. But everything was either like just STEM or just diversity, and not at that intersection. And so that's when I decided, about a year after I graduated, is when I started my company.
Excellent.
I think I'll certainly go. I thought about this question, Jennifer, when you posed it to us in advance, and I honestly can't remember how early it was, but I know when I was 8 and one of my brothers went out and shoveled snow and came back with a handful of cash, that I quickly figured out that was it made me mad that I didn't go along or think of the same idea. So that was a defining moment. And then a little bit unusual, I took my first job at the age of 10, working at a motorcycle shop because I loved motorcycles. And even though my mother said I was too young to work, I said, well, I'm doing this anyway. So I had a pretty independent streak. And this guy was an entrepreneur. And so from that day on, I was certainly fully exposed to it, since I worked every day and have worked every day since then. But the motorcycle shop was a defining moment. Then I started to buy and sell motorcycles as a young.
Wow. Okay. All right, cool. Chip, how about you?
Well, it's interesting. My mother's best friend lived in back of us, and this was in the 70s, and she owned a plant shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so, I would go to her house and hang out with her and her family, but also we would go over to her shop, and she had this huge plant shop right by MIT. And it was just interesting. I would say, you own this? And just watching her actually own the shop, but also being a woman entrepreneur at the time was just amazing to me. And always just, really just enjoyed watching her in action and all those other things. So she was really my earliest experience, Nancy Robinson, to actually see somebody in action owning something, and, seeing her go to work in her big, she had a big Volkswagen, big white Volkswagen, and she would always store the plants in the back of there and drive them all around the city. And so, that was my earliest experience of seeing an entrepreneur. But I think the main piece is, you got to get young people around people that dream. and people that are able to dream and also to bring you to different heights that are just different from your own reality. So being able to go to her shop and saying that she owns that and she does this and all that was just a way to kind of make my imagination get really to just explore.
Yeah. Well, and I'll add just a fourth perspective to this. And I guess I didn't mention my advanced. So my Ph.D. is cardiovascular physiology, and so I was training to be a research scientist. And I didn't grow up around entrepreneurs. But it wasn't frankly until I got to graduate school and I worked in a lab where my advisor was entrepreneurial. So he had started a company based on the research, and then in my next phase of my career, where I was working with intellectual property and licensing, what I really got excited about was working with clinicians and researchers who were spinning out companies around, something that they had invented in the lab or a need that they saw in the clinic. And I thought, well, that's just really cool. And ever since then, I have spent my entire career around supporting entrepreneurs and launching new programs. And so, I think it's a little different for all of us in terms of what motivated us.